Land Shapers, voices from the South Downs landscape, Flint and man.
In South Downs region, flint has been extremely important. We see its use from the earliest human or hominid occupation of the landscape. Way before people had settled, they would have been traversing the area in between the great ice sheets of the ice ages, picking up and utilising these stones that were extremely versatile. I'm Steve Dyer, I'm an archaeologist, and my particular interests are with prehistory, the area before the Romans came to Britain. Flint is extremely important to the evolution of the South Downs area because not only did early people use it for making their implements, but much later on people used it for building purposes. So we see the development of the use of a material over many thousands of years.
Flint is a tough material, and it formed within the chalk. It's only called flint in chalk. There's lots of other rock made of the same material in many other limestones and rocks around the world, but only in chalk is it called flint. I'm Professor Rory Mortimer from the University of Brighton. I've been teaching geology for 34 years there. Flint formed via the bringing together of a material we call silica, which when it gels together forms minerals like quartz, which people may have come across. And in a way, flint is a form of quartz, the way it's grown together. But the flints actually replace the chalk. And you can tell this when you look at any flint, it'll be full of fossils. It'll be full of all the original chalk textures, because the chalk seabed was a very active place. There were lots of animals burrowing down into the seabed. Anyone who's been fishing on the shoreline has dug up logworms will know you've got worms living in the sediment. Well, the seabed further out is no different. Animals are living there, and it was no different during the Cretaceous seas when the chalk was forming. Lots and lots of animals living down in the sediment, taking organic matter down, taking oxygen down, and as a result mixing up the sediment and the chemistry in the seabed. Where those two mix is where the flint forms. And the flint has these wonderful shapes because it is replacing and going around the animal burrows in the seabed.
The earliest evidence we have for the use of flint is for a multi-purpose tool that people have given the name a hand axe, but it is not just an axe. It was not used for chopping down trees and the purposes we think of an axe today. It was a general tool that they could use for butchering carcasses, they could use it for grubbing up plant roots and a whole variety of things. As their skills in working the flint developed, we begin to see scrapers for working the skin of the animals that they have either come across or killed during their hunting. Later on, flint becomes multi-purpose. It serves a whole range of purposes. It makes a whole series of farming tools. So we have evidence of flint sickles for going out and cutting the crop down. We see razors made of flint. We have knives made of flint. A whole range of implements.
It was obviously an incredibly important resource, and in the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, the fact that people were using finely polished stone tools as grave goods, as status symbols effectively, and even using them as sacrificial goods. They were putting them in pits or throwing them in rivers or even the sea to give offerings to the gods or spirit deities in an attempt to make better crops or give them better hunting in the future. So flint tools were incredibly important. My name's Grant Williams and I work with the Sussex Archaeological Society. In later periods, such as the Neolithic, there's evidence that stone tools were being mined on an industrial scale over the Downs. And because of the communication and trade links that the Downs have, these tools were being sent all over the country, and even as far as Asia. There are stone tools, flint tools from Sussex, which have been found as far east as Pakistan, for example. The flint in Sussex was a much higher quality to a lot of the stone that you find throughout the rest of the world.
The flint was extremely important because although it takes a certain amount of skill to develop a usable tool, once they have produced that tool, the edge remains very sharp, and in fact we can find archaeologically flints several thousand years old today that will still cut your hands to pieces.
My name is David Smith and I'm a flint knapper, which means that I work in the landscape using flint in an architectural use. There are really three main types of flints. You get field flints, which are the ones that literally plucked from the field. As farmers, you say it's the one crop that never fails. You also get quarried flints, often known as virgin flints or wet flints, and they're ones that literally, as it says, has to be quarried up. They have a very different quality. The flint is much more predictable in how to work it. And finally there are cobbles, and they're literally, you'll find those in pockets coming off the downs from the beach. So what we try and do when we're working a virgin flint or a wet flint is first trying to pick the flint up and read it, which angles, which side would be the best use. Once we've decided that, it's really about reading the flint. We talked about finding areas of saddles and compression points, and you can then, in theory, predict actually how it will break. For example, I've just seen a saddle in front of me, and I think if I hit it there, I can predict how it's actually going to get a clean face. And once we get a clean face, I can actually rework it. Very similar to when I'm trying to get the face, it's actually working it away from the face. A bit like an onion, you actually want to peel back the outer skin of the onion to just reveal more of the face. It doesn't always work exactly as you want it, but on the whole you can then get cleaner edges, and we can use a variety of hammers, finer hammers to crude hammers, to when you're actually quartering it, which is when you're making the first blows, to the finer details of how you're actually dressing it into a square edge. There.
Flint contributes a vital importance to the built landscape on the South Downs. It's a natural resource found here on the South Downs, and it's used locally in the walls and the buildings, the churches. My name's Richard James, I'm a senior countryside officer. While walking across the South Downs, you'll see many applications of flint, whether that be used in the sort of the rough farm walls, where you'll see flint used with sort of cement and lime mortar. Sometimes these walls could be capped with rounded bricks or flat bricks, right through to sort of the more sort of the barns where you've got the flints have been knapped. Some of them in the sort of the more wealthier barns might have actually been knapped and squared off. You can get squared flints around window frames. Houses, churches, all of these things have all used flint in the past.
Because the South Downs is a conservation area, we're very lucky in that we have to use the right material, and the right material is one that will match the local environment or the local style of flint. And that can vary from village to village, from valley to valley. If it's field flint, for example, we would often pick the flints ourselves. We're very lucky that we have a couple of farmers that we have an agreement that we can work particular fields or particular areas and select our flints. It feels very medieval sometimes walking the fields, but it's lovely to be up there, and we can stockpile those. And the beauty of doing that is that we can also grade them as we're picking them. So we might have a particular project in mind, and therefore we can select those flints, which might be those flints in colour or size, and that can be very important, because when you come to actually build the wall, it can make a huge difference in having the right material rather than trying to make something out of the wrong material.
Land Shapers. Voices from the South Downs landscape. An Audemus production for the South Downs Joint Committee, supported by Hampshire County Council and Natural England.